First of all, those who are on, if anybody's watching on Torah Anytime or on YouTube, we're going to have shir this week, Sunday and Monday. Tuesday and Wednesday there will not be shir because there's going to be a midwinter break here. But today and tomorrow there will be shir, Mitzvah Hashem. Okay, so I just want to finish up 2 points from Yisro, and then we're going on to Mishpatim today. Right at the end, at the end of Yisro, in the Perek Yud Tes Pasuk Chaf. Perek Yud Tes Pasuk, page 404. So this is it's not just limited to Pasuk Chaf. It's the entire giving of the Torah, the entire section that we read last on Shabbos. So if you pick it up from Pasuk Tes Zayin, actually, Vayhi Bayom HaShlishi B'Yosa Boker, it's about 9 lines from the top. On the third day, in the morning, Vayhi Kolos Ubrokim, there were loud sounds and thunder. V'anan Kaved Alahar, and there was a cloud. V'kol Shofar Chazak Mod, a sound of a shofar. V'yecherad Kol Ha'om Asher B'mach, and everybody trembled. So Rosh Shmuel Rozovsky, who was the Rosh Yeshiva, the Panovich Yeshiva, once said this idea of Kolos Ubrokim, there are loud noises and sounds. When the Torah was given, there were loud noises and sounds. So if you ever walk into a Beis Medrash, and guys are learning, and you hear sometimes guys are really getting feverish about it. Guys are yelling at each other, and over the Torah, trying to figure out the pshat and the Gemara. Guys are really going at it. It looks like they're ready to bash each other with hammers, and that's part of Torah. It's kolos ubrakim. You don't have to yell, but in your fever, in your passion to get to the truth. So then sometimes you end up with kolos ubrakim. People are really get into it. So the Gemara says that when a father and a son sit down to learn Torah, or a Rabbi and a Talmud sit down to learn, talk about specifically learning Gemara, they become enemies over the Gemara. The father and son become enemies over the Gemara. The Rabbi and the Talmud become enemies over the Gemara. Yet they walk away and they love each other. But over the Gemara, we're trying to that's one of the reasons there's a chavrusa system. The whole idea of a chavrusa system is that we're trying to get to the truth, trying to figure out what's really being said over here. If I say something, if you have two intelligent people sitting across the table from each other, if you could just close that door, please close. Yeah, thank you. You have two intelligent people sitting across the table from each other, trying to figure out a piece of Gemara. Now, if I say something, and it doesn't make sense to you, so you're going to say, well, that doesn't make sense. If you're learning by yourself, you can deceive yourself. You don't hold yourself to that standard. But if two people are really trying to get to the truth, it's not our ego is on the line over here. We're trying to get to the truth. And I say something and it just doesn't make sense to you. You're going to tell me that it doesn't make sense. And then you're going to say what you think. And I'm going to say, well, I don't know. And we'll start sharpening it up until we get to the point where we get to the truth. That's why you see this idea of learning Torah with chavrusa, as opposed to learning by yourself. When you learn by yourself, so you don't hold yourself to that same exacting standard. You don't have anybody to keep you in check. Whereas with the chavrusa, there's always that shaving it off finer until you get to that point of truth, which is why we're in sometimes the passion of getting to the truth is why there's kolos and brakim. And chavrusas could be yelling at each other. No, you don't know what you're talking. What are you saying? That doesn't make any sense. But it should never become personal. Never personal. Only that we're trying to get to the truth of Torah, number one. Number two, turn to the very last pasuk in Yisro. This is a fundamental, gentlemen. The Torah says over here, this doesn't apply, this is not limited to Parsha Yisro, page 414. This isn't limited to Parsha Yisro. This is something that applies to life in general as a Torah Jew. And the Torah says like this, V'lo b'malos al mizbechi, do not go up the steps on my altar, asher lo sigola irvoscha olav, that your nakedness should not become exposed. Now what this is talking about is that when the Kohanim approach the altar, you all seen a picture of the altar in the base of Mikdash. Maybe we could turn off that heat. It's gonna. What do you call it? Yeah. Yeah. Anybody know how to do it? Turn on. Thank you very much. It says when the Kohanim are in the base of Mikdash, so there's an altar. You've seen the picture of the altar. They should have a picture of it here somewhere. If you've seen the picture of the altar with the ramp going up, you know what I'm talking about. Okay. And the Torah says that when you build this altar and you want to reach to the top of the altar, you do not go up steps, because if you go up steps, Rashi explains that when you extend your stride, so you're exposing the bottom towards the steps going up the altar, which is disrespectful. And Rashi points out, even though the Kohanim wore pants underneath, so it wasn't literally an exposure, but it's indiscreet, and therefore you should build a ramp going up to the top of the altar. That's what the Torah says over here. Now, I want to ask you a question, first of all. This is listed, there's 613 mitzvos in the Torah. There's 613 mitzvos. How do we know that? How do we know that there's 613 mitzvos? What's that? We counted. No. Good. It's a good answer, but no. How do we know there's 613 mitzvos? Because that's what we're told in the Gemara. Because if we would count it, we would come up with who knows how many. So the Gemara tells us there are 613 mitzvahs. How do you count them? That already is a dispute. For example, you have tefillin that you put on your arm, tefillin that you put on your head. Is that one mitzvah or two mitzvahs? Depends which commentaries you ask. Some Rishonim say that counts as one mitzvah. Some say it counts as two mitzvahs. In the sacrifice service, for example, you slaughter it, you skin it, you bring the blood closer, you sprinkle the blood on it. Is that one mitzvah or is that four mitzvahs? Some say it's 1/4. No matter how you count it, at least we know one thing. You got to end up with 613. You got to end up with 613. It's like one of those, you ever see those kids, they have these little puzzles of 15 pieces, and you got to use the pieces to build a house. Now, there are different ways to combine the pieces, but one way or another, you got to end up with a house. I never worked for me. I always had one extra piece. But you got to end up with a house. This is when you count 630, you got to end up with 613, no matter how you count it. There are different ways of counting it. What's remarkable is this mitzvah, that you don't go up steps on the Mizbeach. Everybody counts it as one of the 613. There are 248 positive commands, 365 negative commands. This is a negative command. Don't build steps on the Mizbeach. Don't go up steps on the Mizbeach. Now I want to ask you a question. Who does this apply to? Who are we talking to here? It's one of the 613 mitzvahs in the Torah. Who does this apply to? So, first of all, it applies directly to Kohanim. Okay, now, since it applies to Kohanim, we immediately remove 50% of the population, which is whom? Women, because women don't serve in the Beis HaMikdash. It's actually 50.1. Right? Statistically, there are 50.1 girls born for every 49.9 men. Don't ask me why that is. Don't ask me if it's a good thing. It's a fact. Right? They're 50.1. So we'll take out 50.1% of the population, because they're women, they don't serve in the Beis HaMikdash at all. Now, how many of you are Kohanim? Anybody here a Kohen? Only me? It's lonely at the top. Anybody here a Levi? You may wash my hands. Now let's say statistically 3% of the population is Kohanim. I don't know exactly what it is, 3%, 5%, whatever it is. So now we've eliminated for further 45% of the people. So you have a mitzvah over here that's talking about only the Kohanim who serve in the Beis HaMikdash, and even the Kohanim who serve in the Beis HaMikdash, many Kohanim don't get to serve because the Sanhedrin would inspect them every day when they come in for the service. And any Kohen who had a physical imperfection was removed from the service. So we're talking about maybe 2% of the population, maybe. And it's codified as one of the 613 mitzvahs. So the beauty of the Torah is now I'm going to show you how this mitzvah applies not only to Kohanim, it applies to men, women, in all areas of life, 24/7, in man-to-man mitzvahs, and it applies in man-to-God mitzvahs. Okay, so let's see. Take a look at Rashi. Rashi on page 414. So Rashi says it's the left column. It's the left column, about 6 lines from the end of Rashi. If you see it, please show the person next to you. Asher lo sigola ervoscha. that your erva should not be if you find a plishah person next to you. So Rashi says that the Torah says that don't go up steps, that your nakedness should not be exposed. Shal yedei amalos, because through steps, you have to extend your stride. Ve'afal pi she'eino gilui erva mamish, even though it's not literally an exposure of your nakedness. Sha'arei ksiv also le michnesei bad, because the Kohanim wore pants. Mikol makom, nevertheless, harchavas ha'psios korov legilui ervahu. Extending your stride is close to exposing yourself. It resembles it. Ve'ata noeg behem minag bizayon, you are being disrespectful to the stones. Then Rashi says a kal v'chomer. V'harei dvarim kal v'chomer, it's all the more so. Uma avonim halalu, if these stones, she'ein bahem das lahakpid al bizayon, stones are inanimate, they don't care about being disrespected. Yet, Amra Torah, the Torah says, Hol v'yesh behem tzorach, since they have a need, lo tinag behem minag bizayon, do not treat them with disrespect. Chavercha shehu bidmus yotzercha, your friend who is in the image of God, umakpid al bizyono, he cares about not being shamed, al achas kama v'kama, all the more so. So the Torah is teaching you, a lesson we learn over here. We're learning a lesson from the stones. This applies to everybody. Make sure you don't hurt anybody else's feelings. Make sure you don't treat anybody else with disrespect. Every human being you ever meet in your life, if you listen closely, there's a little voice inside. Every human being you ever meet, male, female, or otherwise, you're the little voice inside that says, please respect me. Doesn't mean honor me, put me on a pedestal, and maybe make a dinner for me. It means please respect me as a person. And every human being you ever meet, nobody wants to be insulted or degraded. The Torah is teaching you over here, if stones, which are inanimate, and you have to, what do you call it? Now, if you notice that this is a theme that repeats itself in the Torah all over the place, where do the stones really care? So what good does it do me to what difference does it make how I treat stones? So let me ask you a question. Anybody know why do we cover challah on Shabbos? Why do we cover the challah?
Because usually we make the blessing on challah first, but on Shabbat we do the blessing on the wine first.
So that's a second reason that's given. The first reason that's given is because it's a commemoration of the manna. The manna came down from heaven, and it had a layer underneath, a layer on top. So we cover the challah. The challah has a challah board, and you cover it over because it's symbolic of the manna. Okay, good. Then there's a second reason. What Yaakov says. Second reason. Second reason is that normally the bread is the feature attraction at a meal, and on Friday night, where wine becomes the center of the central attraction, or the wine becomes the star of the show, because we make the kiddush over to wine, so we don't want to hurt the feelings of the challah, so we keep the challah covered. So keep the challah. Okay, now imagine some Jew, secular Jew, who's never had any exposure, first time in his life he's invited to a family for Shabbos. Comes into a frum home, and he has a Shabbos meal with his frum family. And he sits there, have a beautiful meal, and they gefilte fish, and what do you go, chicken, and they're singing, and everything. Okay, and then at the end of the meal, he says, maybe, the guy says, maybe, is there anything you'd like to ask? He says, yeah, I'm wondering, a lot of things I saw over here, I'm just wondering, I noticed that when the men came home from shul, they sang a song about the angels. He says, yeah, we believe the ministering angels accompany us home from shul on Shabbos. Wow, that's really spiritual, really nice. Then you sang something about a woman soldier. He goes, no, she's not a soldier. It's the woman of valor, the woman of the home. And we sing a tribute to her because we know we won't get a good meal next week if we don't. We sing, oh wow, that's unbelievable. Then you picked up the cup of wine and you said something. It's just a declaration that we're better than everybody else, that we're chosen. Oh wow, this is really neat. And then I noticed everybody went into the kitchen, they washed their hands, and they said, no. I said, no, that's a ritual because the bread. And I noticed that they had the challah bread covered. Why is that? I said, well, the bread's essential. We don't want to hurt the feelings of the bread when we're. Now, if up until that point, everything you said was rational, any normal person who hears you saying that, now this guy just heard you say, we don't want to hurt the feelings of the challah. He's going to be looking around the room like, did anybody else hear what this guy just said? And the worst part is everybody's going to be going like this. Yeah, it's true. Yeah. The guy thinks he's in a loony bin over here. He's going to be out the door. If he had any brains, he'd get out the door. So what's going on? Gentlemen, I will make a public confession. There have been times that I've actually listened for my challah, and I've heard them weeping copious tears because they've been, no. So what's going on? The answer is that if even in the inanimate world, we train ourselves, then when it comes to human beings, all the more. So if I'm sensitive to challah, then when it comes to a human being where it really counts, so then I'm going to be in practice. Then I'll be sensitive to a human being. And that's a theme that we find repeatedly all over. The Gemara says, don't throw a stone. A well that you've drunk water from, don't throw a stone in it. You drink water out of the well, don't toss a stone in the well to degrade the stuff. What's the difference? Because you owe a debt of gratitude to the well. Yeah, but the well will never protest, no matter how many stones I throw in. Yeah, but if you don't throw stones at the well, you're certainly going to throw stones at a human being. You'll certainly show gratitude to a human being. So the Torah is telling you over here, if you're concerned about your own dignity, about the dignity of stones, you got to be concerned about the dignity of a human being. That applies to everybody under all circumstances, number one. Number two, did you ever hear Rabbi Avram Genechovsky? Rabbi Avram Genechovsky was the Rosh Yeshiva of the Chebin Yeshiva here in Israel. The Chebin Yeshiva. He was a tremendous, tremendous Torah scholar, one of the Gedolim. He had a study session. He had a chavrusa. One of the kollel members of his yeshiva had a chavrusa with Rabbi Avram Genechovsky. Every Friday night after the meal, he would come to the Rosh Yeshiva's house, and they would sit down and they would learn after the meal. One Friday night, this guy comes up to the door, and he forgot that it was Shabbos, and he rang the doorbell. So he's waiting. Nothing happens. The guy felt terrible. He just rang Rosh Yeshiva's doorbell on Shabbos. He forgot. It happens. So he's waiting, and he starts knocking. He knocks for about 5 minutes. After 5 minutes, Rabbi Genechovsky, bleary-eyed in his pajamas, opens the door. He goes, "Oy, I forgot we had a chavrusa. I was so tired after the meal, I went to sleep. I heard you're knocking. Woke me up. Just 1 second. Let me change and we'll learn." Okay. They sat down and they learned. After Rabbi Genechovsky died, his children said that's not what happened. He did not forget that he had a chavrusa. What happened? He heard the doorbell ring. And he knew that if he answers the doorbell, this guy will cringe in shame knowing that the Rosh Yeshiva heard him accidentally transgress Shabbos. So he changed into his pajamas and got into bed so that he could then tell the guy that it was the knocking that woke him up. So the guy never knew that he heard the doorbell. That's the lesson of the stones of the Beis HaMikdash. Somebody else's dignity, we have to be very careful not to trample on somebody else's honor and dignity. That's what the Torah is teaching you. That number one, between man and his fellow man. Number two, what's the difference between stones and a ramp? What's the difference between, not stones, steps? What's the difference between steps and a ramp going up to an altar? So it's a very interesting difference. An altar, in every religion, a mizbeach, an altar, represents your devotion to whatever it is you're worshiping, right? Every religion has an altar of some sort. In the ancient world, they had altars where there was human sacrifice. They would take a human being up there on the altar, and they would sacrifice a human being. How exactly they chose who goes, I'm not sure. I probably didn't have a long line of volunteers. There are more people volunteering to fly to Mars than human. Do you know that they actually they've got a list of people when they eventually make space travel, make it capable of getting to Mars, which is supposed to be like a 3-year trip. I mean, that's one of those things where you say goodbye, you don't expect to see you again, and they have people who are volunteering to do it. They want to get to Mars. Like, okay, I'm not on that list. I like chess, but Mars is not for me. But there are people who are actually volunteering for this. I imagine human sacrifice did not have as long a list, but they would actually have an altar, and they would kill people on the altar. However, every religion has an altar. In Torah, the mizbeach, the altar, represents the ultimate and divine service. Climbing up towards the top of that altar represents our goal in life. Our goal in life is to get closer and closer and to constantly grow as Torah Jews. Now, what's the difference between climbing steps and climbing up a ramp? The answer is that if you walk up steps, at any point, steps are flat. You could stop at any level. That represents the person who, in his growth, he says, my growth is over. I'm satisfied with my level and I'm done growing. On a ramp, if you stop, and depending on the incline obviously, but if you're ever on an uphill, on an incline, at the point that you stop pedaling your, what's the word? Moving your legs. If as soon as you stop pushing yourself forward, it's a different word I'm looking for, you end up backsliding. That's what Torah is. Torah is constant growth. Torah is not steps. Steps represents, well, I got to this point, I'm done growth. That's not. If you stop growing, you by definition, you're backsliding. There's no such thing. We are here to grow constantly. You have to solidify your levels. You have to grow at a certain rate. You have to grow. Yaakov's ladder represents one rung at a time. You can't jump too many levels at one time. You can't jump levels. On the other hand, the ramp represents that you have to constantly be moving forward, higher, upwards. And if you stop, you start backsliding. And that's why there's a ramp going up to the Mizbech. That represents our entire attitude in growth in Yiddishkeit, that we're constantly moving forward. On the other hand, there's another difference. Steps may be, let's say they're 7 inches apart. That means every person takes the same step. On a ramp, no 2 strides are identical. Yours are 6 7/8. Yours are 7 4. Yours are 7 1/2. Yours are 8 1/4. Yours are 6 17 29ths. Right? Everybody's got a different size stride. That means on the one hand you have to grow, on the other hand you have to grow at your pace, not somebody else's pace. You can't look at somebody else and grow at his level. You have to move, but you have to move at your pace, not at somebody else's pace. A person who says, I'm done growing, at that point, a person by definition is going to backslide, because that runs against the entire grain of what Yiddishkeit is all about. There was once an old man who was watching these little boys who were having a contest. And this contest was who could get highest. They were climbing this pole in the park. And the contest was to see who could get the highest. So there's an old man watching these little kids, and each time one little boy kept winning the contest. He got higher than anybody else. So finally, after the contest, the old man came over to the little boy and said to him, you know what, I was watching, I know why you won every time. Because all the other little boys, the higher they got, at a certain point, they looked downwards. And when they looked down, they saw how high they were, they got nervous, so they stopped climbing. You always kept your focus upwards. You never looked down. That's why you climbed higher than anybody else. The old man was the Chiddushei Harim, one of the great Hasidic masters, and the little boy was his grandson, the Sfas Emes, again, one of the cornerstones of Chassidish talk. That's part of growth is we got to keep focused upwards, but don't without losing control. It has to be done. It has to be done one step at a time. So, and in the process of growth, the person has to solidify his position. That yes, you have to solidify your level, but not that this is it. I've heard people say, "I'm comfortable with my level." Yeah, but who said Hashem is? You may be comfortable. Hashem expects us to grow. Growth is never finished. You know that they once took a group of soldiers into the Panovich Yeshiva, secular Israeli soldiers. This was a program that there was a certain outreach organization. They would take them in because the Yeshiva stereotype in Israel, the left wing press has convinced people that Yeshiva, when they hear the word Yeshiva, they think of monasteries. You think of some gloomy place with melty candles like those on the wall. Like these triangles, like melty candles melting on the wall. And just a bunch of morbid people walking around going like that. That's what they think. So they bring secular Jews into the yeshivas sometimes, and that shatters all the stereotypes, because they walk into Panovich, and you got 800 or 1,000 guys who are learning Gemara with kolos ubrakim. And guys are going at it. It is all. And it's a shock to everybody. My goodness, I thought it's a major energy compared to what they're picturing. They're picturing a morbid library, and this is what he call it, and it's a tremendous energy. Okay, it shatters the stereotypes. So they once took a group of soldiers into the Panovich Yeshiva. So one of these soldiers is like, he's standing there, he's shocked, he couldn't believe what he saw. So he looks around the room and he sees a little old man. So he walks over to this old man. He says, "Can I ask you a question? How long have you been here?" He goes, "Oh, about 45 years. He says, 45 years? Are you still making progress? He says, "Oh, Baruch Hashem, a little bit of progress every day, a little more progress." It turned out that this little old man was Rav Shach Zatzal, who was the Rosh Yeshiva of Panovich, and the leader of Lithuanian Jewry, right? The unchallenged leader of Lithuania. So he happened, it was his lucky day. He hit Rav Shach. But Rav Shach teaches an important lesson. He was at the time about a young man of 95. Something like that. Rav Shach died when he was 103, 104, 107. They don't even know how old he was. He was well over 100. That's all they know. And here he was, and his attitude was, every day I'm making a little progress. Who told you that? Okay, that's it. If I'm at the finish line, there's no finish line. There's no finish line. I think the Chinese ping pong team, You're wondering how I know this. I know. If it's important, I know it, okay? The Chinese ping pong team won a championship, yet again, obviously. And the Chinese ping pong team won a championship. And now what do most American sports teams do when they win a championship? So, that night, there isn't enough alcohol in Scotland to satisfy the need. The Chinese ping pong team, that night, they were right back at a practice. They just won the championship, and they're right back at a practice. They have maybe a little bit of chow mein, and then let's go back to the let's go, boys. What are you practicing for? When Kobe Bryant put up 200 shots a day, he would fly, and when the team came in, this is the guy that was arguably one of the best shooters. What's his name? Steph Curry, the best shooter. Yet he puts up 200 shots, 300 shots a day. Larry Bird will put up 500 shots a day. And this is after he's already won an MVP and he's won. Why are you still shooting? Because, listen, you can still improve. There's still stuff to work on. You could always get better. And that's what the Torah is telling us. We could always get better. I mean, you can't become a Kohen, but you could get better. So, and by the way, guys, when the Beis Hamikdash is built, it should happen soon. There are certain things you give to Kohanim. Just remember the Parsha shir, okay? There's going to be truma, and there's going to be parts of the meat of the animal, and if you have to redeem your firstborn son, that's cash. So just remember where you met a Kohen first. Okay. You're a Kohen, right, Tuvia? There you go. Okay. No, we're not sharing. I don't like you. You're moving on my turf, bro. Out here. This is we have ways of dealing with people like you. So we'll make you an offer. Okay. 4:16. Ve'ela mishpatim asher tasib lifneihem. Now I'm going to ask you guys a question. These are the statutes that you should lay out for the Jewish people. Now, if you take a look at Rashi, it's the second Rashi on the page, right column, 4 lines from the top. If you find it, please show the person next to you. These are the statutes that you should, Hashem says to Moshe, that you should teach the Jewish people. So Rashi says over here, Asher Tosim Lifneim. Amar lo HaKadosh Baruch Hu LaMoshe. Hashem said to Moshe, Lo sala al daitcha lomar, don't think to say, I'll teach them the law or the chapter 2 or 3 times, that they'll memorize it by rote. That's not how I want you to communicate the Torah to the Jewish people. And I won't trouble myself to make them understand the rationale and the idea behind it. Therefore, it says you should place it before them. I want you to lay out the Torah for the Jewish people like a table that's been set and it's ready for consumption. That's what God says to Moshe. And I want to ask you guys a question. Didn't it ever, what do we call the body of law, of Jewish law? What do we call it? The Shulchan Aruch. Doesn't it ever strike you as strange? I'm going to open a book now. It's called The Set Table. I want to look up a law. It's called The Set Table. I mean, honestly, Jews are into food. But, for 5 minutes, we're trying to check a halacha over here having to do with monetary law or with a mezuzah or with tefillin. And what book do we take? The Set Table, right? So, in America, what do they call it? What do they call the legal book in America? They don't call it the Big Mac. Oh, go get the Big Mac. Let's look up this law. Let's see if you parked illegally. Check the Big Mac. In England, they don't call the book of law the fish and chips, right? In Japan, they don't call it sushi. Get me the sushi book, will you? They call it whatever the law is called, the Constitution, whatever they call it in England, whatever it's called. No, we call it the Set Table. Shulchan Aruch, number 1. Number 2, what is Torah rationale called? What does it go on? The Gemara says mai taima. What does mai taima mean? What does the word mai taima mean when you're in Gemara? What's the reason? What does the word ta mean? It means flavor, a taste, right? What's that got to do with asking? My time, or what's the taste? I just say, what's the reason? Ma siba, or whatever word it would be. Why are we talking about food and taste and everything else? The answer is that there's something called rationale. The study of mitzvahs is actually there's a study of mitzvahs called tamei hamitzvahs, the rationale of the mitzvahs, which means the taste of the mitzvahs. Why? The answer is that if somebody would ask you, why should you put on tefillin? Or why should you keep Shabbos? Or why should you not wear shatnez? What's the reason? There's one reason. What? God said so. God said so. There's something about that, okay, well, I don't have a choice. So I'm going to put on tefillin. I'm not going to wear shatnez, and I'm not going to eat, what do you call it, the shellfish. But at the end of the day, there's something it's not 100% satisfying. It's not the best reason I could think of. Well, I got no choice. I won't do it. It's like your father said to you, because I said so. Did your father ever say that to you? Why? Because I said so. Yeah, I'd still like to understand why. When you eat, there are two reasons to eat. Either because of nutritional value, we need to eat to stay alive, or we eat because it's enjoyable to eat. Now, God could have just as easily given us tasteless tofu, and you have to 3 times a day eat a certain amount of tasteless tofu and survive, and we would do it. How satisfying would that be? Well, not very satisfying. So what does God do in his kindness? God gives food a flavor, which creates it enhances the enthusiasm. By the way, not only food has a flavor, food even has an appearance. There's a whole discipline of culinary presentation, right? How to make food look, what food looks like. Mostly, women get very excited about how food looks. That's why you go to a wedding and you see, like, when you walk in, there's a swan made out of carrot sticks or celery or something. And it's like, wow, look at that swan. The men are thinking, where's the meat? I don't care if it looks like a swan or if it looks like a shechted swan. Just get me the meat. The women are, wow, look at that. There's a house made out of chocolate. Would you just give me the chimney already? I'm hungry. It's a different slightly. Women are more into the aesthetics. But at the end of the day, we also eat based on our eyes if it looks appetizing. Could you imagine if watermelon, look at watermelon, it's green and it's red, it's got all these happy colors, right? And it even looks like they serve it, it looks like it's smiling at you, right? What if watermelon was transparent? It wouldn't make it. It just would not be the same. Every time I'm at a table and they serve watermelon, they bring out watermelon, there's always somebody at the table who says, oh wow, watermelon. And I'm not sure, nobody ever says, oh wow, potatoes. I'm not sure why that is. Watermelon elicits this response. I don't know, something exciting about it. What if watermelon was transparent? Nobody would get excited. Do you know that Pepsi? I assume that you guys are Pepsi people, right? Are Pepsi, how many of you drink Coke over Pepsi? How many of you drink Pepsi over Coke? How many of you drink neither? Oh man. How many of you drink Dr. Pepper? Please leave. The Dr. Pepper? Oh boy.
It's the best out of all three. It's a mixed drink. They just threw everything together.
I know. I'm telling you, they took everything that wasn't healthy from Pepsi and they put it into a bottle called a Dr. Pepper. That's why I call you need a doctor for it. That's why. What kind of name is that? I'm not going to get into it. The point is.
Pepsi.
What about RC?
Never
Ooh. You ever hear RC's like winning the bronze in the Olympics? Nobody remembers him. The silver once in a while. Nobody remembers the bronze. Okay, so Pepsi once tried putting out marketing something called Pepsi Clear, where they took out the black coloring, they left in all of the other caffeine, cocaine, sugar, everything else that makes it the popular drink that it is. They took out the color and they marketed because they felt that consumers see clear as healthy. And they figured, okay, now I'll drink. It bombed on the market. If I'm going to drink Pepsi, I want it to look unhealthy. I don't want it just to be unhealthy. I want it to look unhealthy. And so it bombed on the market. So we eat with our eyes. Why is it called Tamei HaMitzvos? Why is it called a Shulchan Aruch? Because in God's kindness, he says, not only I want you to fulfill the mitzvahs, I want you to try to understand the wisdom behind the mitzvahs. Now, no matter what we come up with, we will never fathom the depth of God's wisdom in any one mitzvah. We will never fathom and understand why God gave us this mitzvah. But essentially, if we see a benefit in the mitzvah, then we can assume that God also had that in mind. For example, people say, well, pork consumption, we're not allowed to eat pork. Why? There's something called trichinosis. Trichinosis poisoning that you get from pork. If you boil it or they take care of it, so it's not a problem. That doesn't mean it was the only reason. But there's certainly, not coincidentally, that by not avoiding pork, we don't get trichinosis poisoning. And not coincidentally, from Jewish women who keep the laws of family purity, not coincidentally, have the lowest incidence of cervical cancer of any group of women in the world. Yeah. Not coincidentally. And so on and so forth. So if we find a benefit from the mitzvah, we can be sure that God had that in mind. It doesn't mean it was the only reason. And not only that, there are reasons that are presented which you may feel, well, I don't know that that's such a good reason. Okay, it's only a reason. But the commentaries go to town trying to find what benefits, what are the ideas behind the reason. That's called tamei mitzvahs. Why? Because it makes the mitzvah more palatable. It makes the mitzvah, creates an enthusiasm. If I know that I'm putting on tefillin, and tefillin, according to the commentaries, represents a badge of honor from God. Imagine you were given a badge of honor, the Medal of Valor or whatever they give you, the Purple Heart, and you put on tefillin, and you know that you're putting on, it's a badge of honor that you got from God. That makes, badges I like. I'll put on a badge, even if I got to wrap it and turn my arm blue, that's worth it. So be a badge, be the blue heart instead of the purple heart. But whatever it is, it's a badge of honor. It makes it more, creates an enthusiasm. That's why it's called tamei mitzvahs. That's why it's called Shulchan Aruch. That Moshe Rabbeinu is told, lay out the mitzvahs in front of the Jewish people. Just a coincidence. I just want to show you one coincidence. A coincidence, but I'm convinced that if it's not the main reason, it's certainly part of the reason. How many main holidays do we have in the course of the Jewish year?
3.
We have a few, but there are 2 main holidays, which are Pesach and Sukkot. Pesach is Shavuos is also a holiday. It's a one day. You have Pesach and Sukkot, which are both a 1 week chunk of holiday. Now, when do they come out? Exactly 6 months from each other. Isn't that remarkable? In the secular world, how many weeks vacation does the average guy get? 2 weeks out of the year, right? You have a 2 week vacation. Look what we have in the Torah world. You got 2 weeks, 2 week vacation. You got 2 week vacation. If you're a teacher, so you get 2 months in summer, right? You get 2 months. That's one of the benefits. It ain't the salary, right? So you get at least a 2 month vacation, so you can go to work and try to supplement yourself. But you get the 2 week vacation. Isn't that interesting? And they come exactly 6 months apart. So every 6 months, look at Shabbos. What does Shabbos do for a Torah Jew? Besides the idea it commemorates creation and very spiritual. We spoke about this last week. But look what Shabbos does more than just creating the family unit. You have a break in your weekly routine. Isn't it interesting? You go through the week and all of a sudden Shabbos goes, you just kind of hit the off switch. You just...
The Russians tried to do a 10-day work week and it didn't work out.
What's that?
The Russians tried to do a 10-day work week.
It didn't work out. The Chinese also had tried to make an 8-day week. And that's one of the proofs of Torah, by the way, when they use it, if anybody needs proof. But this interesting idea that everywhere in the world there's a 7-day week. Now, when was this international conference that got together and decided that in Indonesia and in the Congo and in China and in Tibet and in North Carolina, everywhere there's a 7-day week? And the Chinese once, apparently, in the 15th century, during the Ming Dynasty, you don't know if that's true or not. You don't know enough to know if that's true, and I certainly don't know if it's true. But it was sometime then that they tried to make an 8-day week. Officially made another day, an 8th day, and there was some sort of war, and people killed each other over it. So where did the 7-day week come from? The Torah says God created the world in 7 days. That's a given in mankind. That's a given. When was the international conference that gold is valuable? Where'd that come from? International gold, everywhere you go to gold. The Incas had the gold and the Spanish came and they killed the Incas for the gold. I mean, when did the Spanish and Incas decide first that the gold is worth something? And everywhere you went in the world, everybody in the world valued gold because the Torah says that gold. The Torah mentions in Bereshit, God created the world. That's where the gold is. That's what the Torah says openly. So gold has an inherent value in man because God created it that way. So you have 2 holidays. So watch this. They're exactly 6 months apart. So not only we have a break in the normal weekly routine with Shabbos, we then have a break in the yearly routine with a week of Yontif. How do you like that? You have a week to take off, to spend time with your family, and then Hashem in His kindness gives you a respite of 6 months till you got to do that again. right? But there you are. But there's that break in the routine, and then there's a break in the routine. That's what we call tamei mitzvahs. Tamei mitzvahs means that if you find a benefit of a mitzvah. By the way, there was a friend of mine's a doctor. He told me he knew a girl that developed some sort of parasite in her brain. And so she went to a doctor, and they did a surgery or something. She was okay. And then after the surgery, the doctor said to her, "Can I ask you a question? Are you Jewish?" She said, "Yeah, why do you ask?" And then nowadays you can't ask that question, right? You can't even ask somebody. You can't even ask if you're male or female. You can't ask anything, right? Are you Jewish? She said, "Yeah." He said, "Why do you ask?" He said, "Because the parasite that you have is a parasite that comes from abundant pork consumption. And I know that Jews don't eat pork, so I'm just wondering how you ended up with this parasite." She says, "Well, I am Jewish, but I'm not observant, and my favorite food is pork." She became a Baal Tshuva because of that little Musar session. How do you like that? So they take it from wherever you get it. There were a couple of Jewish guys, a couple of Israelis who were in Scotland. They were sitting and eating in a roadside restaurant. They ordered a meal in a non-kosher establishment, a roadside restaurant, and they're sitting there, these two Israeli guys, and the proprietor comes over with their meal, with their plates, and he says, "Can I just ask you a question? Do you mean your people have suffered for 2,000 years just so you could eat the same food we do? How's that for an appetite? Bon appetit." Enjoy, fellas. So the Torah is telling you over here, if you study the mitzvahs and you find the benefit from the mitzvah, the benefit of the mitzvah, if there's a benefit in the mitzvah, we could assume God had that in mind. It's not the only thing. And one of the books, Sefer Charedim, says that if a person would live 1,000 years twice, that's 2,000, by the way. I'll get to you one second. If a person would live, that's how he puts it. If a person would live 1,000 years twice, he still would not fathom the depth of even one mitzvah in the Torah. But the Rambam says to the degree that we're able to, we should investigate and try to see what God could have had in mind behind the mitzvah. That way it makes it more palatable, and we'll do the mitzvah with greater enthusiasm. Question?
Just with the mitzvot, in order to taste it, is the doing where we get the flavor, so to speak? Because you could study about a plate of chicken and how you cook it, until the end of time, but you'll never really know the benefit until you actually do it or taste it, so to speak. We're
supposed to study the mitzvahs and the halachas and know the details of how to perform the mitzvahs, everything about it, like cooking a plate of chicken. One point, very important, you remind me, very important. Even after we present, let's say Shabbos. Shabbos is to give us a day of relaxation and so on and so forth. But if there's ever a conflict between the letter of the law and the spirit of the law wins out. So for example, if you fly into a certain city and your flight was delayed and you end up in the airport on Shabbos and you got in 15 minutes before Shabbos and you have no way to get out of the airport, now you're stuck with apples and crackers for 24 hours and it's not going to be very relaxing and very festive. And the alternative is to break Shabbos and drive to the nearest Jewish community for a half hour and then you have a very relaxing. The letter of the law overrides the spirit of the law. So the spirit of the law may be for relaxation and comfort and everything else. The letter of the law says you can't drive on Shabbos. We actually knew a man in Chicago who was a ritual slaughterer, as a shochet. He used to work in Iowa. So he would leave Chicago on Monday morning and he'd fly back Friday afternoon and spend time with his family. So he came in for one Friday afternoon. He would usually arrive an hour before Shabbos, a 45-minute flight. And there was a Chicago blizzard. Any of you who have never experienced a Chicago blizzard, you have some free time, really I recommend it. It's really great fun. And he was in a, what's that?
How many feet of snow?
Many. And he was what do you call it? Even as a kid, we used to listen to the reports on the radio on snow days. Public school 107 is closed. There will be no classes. Public Roosevelt High School, there will be no classes. Beis Yaakov Hebrew Parochial School will be having classes as usual every time. And we're listening. Oh, no. One time we got off in '67. There was one major blizzard. We were always listening. And they had a whole list. No school. Beis Yaakov Hebrew Parochial School will be having. No, I didn't hear that. Mommy, I got a fever. That was one of those. This guy landed about 15 minutes before Shabbos. He locked his stuff in the locker, and he walked from O'Hare Airport to West Rogers Park in a blizzard. Took him about 4.5 hours to walk. His wife was in a panic because her husband never called. Those days there were no cell phones. His husband never called. He never showed up before Shabbos. She came across the street crying to my mother. She had 3 little kids at home. Lived right across the street from us. All of a sudden, 10 o'clock at night, he trudges in. He had walked about 5 hours in this blizzard. It's a 20-minute drive on the highway. He walked 5 hours in the blizzard from O'Hare Airport to West Rogers Park. He said he was on the highway, and there he is walking, and the cars are covered and overturned. And the cop car says, if I see this guy walking, and come on, get in, buddy, we'll give you a ride. He goes, no, I'm just walking, thanks. And he's lucky they didn't pick him up and put him in a happy home. They want to go, this guy's out there on the highway. But the letter of the law says you can't, so you don't. That's why the letter of the law, conflict between the letter of the law and the spirit of the law, the letter of the law always wins out. So gentlemen, again, tomorrow we're starting at 10 after 12. 10 after 12 from now on till 5 to 1 instead of 12:15 to 1 o'clock. Okay?
Thank you, Rabbi.